Hello again, my friend. In this tutorial, we will discuss the fourth archetype, known as the sadist. Who is the sadist? The sadist is the part of oneself that derives great pleasure from hardship. This archetype's superpower is the ability to absorb pain and adversity. The motto is, "That's nothing. I've got it much worse," which means to say that this part of oneself takes pride in its ability to endure hardship where pain is the name of the game. Now, I appreciate that the word sadist conjures up the image and idea of someone that is depraved and despicable, where someone has sinister, seedy and heartless intentions, like a dark villain that we see portrayed in horror movies or in books. Except for sadism is more commonplace and normal than we think. Most of us engage with some type of what I call everyday sadism, and we do it without realizing it. You see, the sadist is the part of oneself that derives great relief, pleasure, and sometimes sexual gratification from the pain and humiliation that is inflicted upon the self and others. We are getting a little kick, a sense of empowerment from engaging with behaviours that inflict pain. The sadist trait is active when we engage with cruel intentions towards others, when we are demeaning, antagonistic and revengeful. The sadist derives a sense of vindication and reward by dealing with hardship. So let's go deeper into the different types of sadism. There is adversity sadism, abuse sadism, and sexual sadism. We begin with adversity sadism. The sadism trait within us loves the challenge of hardship and difficulty. It's the part of us that gets a pleasurable kick from dealing with tough and disadvantageous situations. So whenever the going gets tough, this part of you, the sadist, this part of you gets going, it gets fired up, defiant and determined and ready to handle the moment, to take on the problems and conquer the task and deal with the consequences come what may, because it leans into the pain and revels in the discomfort and torment. Now, the sadist archetype can be a beneficial asset to your life. There is a sense of achievement, empowerment and self-respect to be gained from tackling difficult situations. By leaning into those tough challenges, we are able to prove our worthiness, strength and endurance. So we need that bring it on, is that all you got mentality that primes us with the juice to get stuff done. With this, the sadist mindset is a great asset for pushing through discomforts and limitations, which we need to do in order to break out of a place of being disadvantaged and misfortunate, in order to achieve personal growth and to succeed with ambitions. Because all achievements and growth do require that we embrace the pains of progress. The secret to embracing pain is to temper and manage pain in tolerable doses, knowing when to push the gas pedal and when to ease off. The sadist archetype will help you to cultivate and then draw upon a hardened resilience that is able to push through painful circumstances, absorbing the harsh punches as you progress forward. Lifestyle creation and self-development does require us to embrace a degree of emotional, mental, physical pain to evolve forward. Like they say, no pain, no gain. So the choice is simple. Either we fight for what we want today, or fight against what we don't want tomorrow. And this is where the sadist part of us will help us fight for a better tomorrow. Which brings us to the flip side, the negative, the detrimental impact of this archetype. The sadist is likely to feel uncomfortable when situations have become favourable and easy. Which means if the sadist is a strong trait within you, you will find it difficult to relax and take it easy. You will feel abnormal to not be enduring some type of pain. This characteristic trait, the sadist, does need some type of discomfort and hardship in order to feel validated. And so this part of you will instinctively go looking for problems and troubles just to feed its desires. The problem is, the sadist will live by the sword and die by the sword, where this part of self will engineer difficulties and problems that most of the time are just totally unnecessary, where this part of you makes life an endless cycle of shifting from one problematic circumstance to the next, where life then becomes this relentless uphill battle of needing to conquer one hill after the other, and without respite. The sadist can also develop a mistaken belief that attention, worthiness, and good fortune can only be obtained through hardship. The sadist, therefore, is likely to reject conditions that are fortuitous and be blindsided to the opportunities and strategies that make life easier. When things get too good, too easy and comfortable, the sadist is likely to flip over the table and create a problematic mess that needs to be salvaged. There is a propensity for life to be a series of problems that must be overcome. That's because the sadist is imbalanced with a destructive and chaotic nature, which leads me on to the abuse type of sadism. The sadist does have strong tendencies to harm the self and others. Now, you might think it's odd when I say that there is a good time to be harmful. And by that, I mean constructive harm. Because to make something better, you do sometimes have to remove or destroy the things about it which are worse. You've also heard of the term, you've got to be cruel to be kind. Well, there is some truth and virtue in that statement. If you overtreat yourself, which means you are being too soft, too easy, and too forgiving on yourself, then you can become vulnerable to someone that will take advantage of you. And you can start to develop a weak and complacent character. That's because when you wrap yourself up in cotton wool and are too overprotective, and you overlook your inferiorities, these parts of you do become major vulnerabilities. They become chinks in the armour. They become weak spots that can be exposed and exploited. Therefore, you need to expose yourself to the harshness of life. In a sense, you need to be brutal and brash towards how you approach life, in which to encounter experiences that will help you develop a thick skin. In a world of daggers, spears, forked tongues, where people you know and don't know can slice you in two with their words and actions, you need to be bullish enough to take the hits and not be hurt and damaged by what they say and do. So, by being combative with life and people that come at you with unacceptable terms and standards of behaviour, often you need to be insensitive, harsh, direct and brutally honest. You may even need to use profane language as a warning to others that you are not to be messed with. But you must be tough on yourself first, so that you can handle the toughness out there when it comes your way. Because if you are not sometimes being hard and critical on yourself, if you are not demanding better from you, then complacency settles in. Complacency is to start feeling proud, comfortable and satisfied with who you are and with what you've done, when really you can do a little bit more. You can do a little bit better. When we do ease off the gas pedal and get comfortable, we do stop growing. Complacency itself does equal less willingness, less responsiveness, and less activity. We can be unwilling to do any more than we think is necessary. We are unresponsive to that which could challenge or demand that we do more. We can become inactive where there is nothing worth rising up for to be challenged. Therefore, the sadist trait is what you sometimes need to be tough, unreasonable, unsympathetic and ruthless in your approach. Sometimes you do need to call on that fighting spirit, call forth that impulse of challenge and motivation. The sadist archetype is a trait that will help you to break free from limiting patterns. All breakthrough changes do require that you be unreasonable and harsh towards the habitual self, demanding with that part of self that refuses to become and do more. Sometimes it must be made known in the most brutal and honest way that it's not okay for you to flunk out of life and avoid the work that needs to be done. We must often demand the best of ourselves to avert the worst of ourselves. Of course, that said, the sadist mentality is one that can overstep the mark into the worst. And this is when it has a detrimental impact on you. The sadist can be a trait that lacks self-love, compassion and care for the self. Symbolic of the psychological Cat-O-9 tales, the sadist will criticize and belittle the self for not being and doing better to a point. It's having a negative and demoralizing effect on you. The sadist part of you can normalize hardship, and when suffering has been normalized, the sadist is likely to disproportionately think that everyone else must endure suffering too. But for those who do not share the same enthusiasm for pain, the sadist will frown upon them for being weaker and take resentment over their ability to enjoy a painless existence. With little empathy and respect for people who can't or won't endure pain and discomfort, the sadist archetype is likely to press their buttons and provoke conflict. And when this happens all the time, it leads to abusive and broken relationships. That's because the sadist archetype can have a dark character triad of narcissism, psychopathy and deceitfulness, where the sadist will use and abuse people to his or her own advantage, seeing them as pawns to exploit in order to obtain one's personal desires. Holding a dispassionate view towards people, the sadist will believe that the ends justify the means, where anything goes. The sadist does secretly enjoy it when other people experience difficulty and suffer. This enjoyment of watching other people experience pain and struggle can be expressed through video gaming, playing sports, relational disputes, and in all other forms of competition, conflict and disruption. Which then brings me on to the last type of sadism, which is called sexual sadism. Sexual sadism has become normalized with the advent of pornography that has defiled the sensual beauty of sexuality, and Hollywood movies and TV dramas that portray the lustful and predatory aspects of intimate courtship. And with sex shops and hookup platforms that provide outlets and paraphernalia for people to act out forms of sadistic sexual activities. Now, sexual sadism can have a beneficial asset. When there are two consenting adults, playful biting, slapping and hair pulling has a sadistic yet harmless nature. Wanting to see your sexual partner in a submissive and compliant position releases a sense of dominance, empowerment, and gratification. Some people do love to be dominated, whereas others prefer to dominate. It's all part of the yin and yang courtship of sexual energy. The yin and yang balance can, however, tilt into sexual depravity, where sexual sadism has taken a dark and seedy route. This is when people start to indulge in forms of torture, humiliation, disfiguration, and mutilation, where people treat each other like sexual and animalistic objects. Nothing but desecration, defilement, and self-degradation will come from sadistic acts of sexual gratification, which can lead to the negative emotions of disgust, loathing, shame, and unworthiness, which people will tend to repress because they cannot live with themselves and what they've done. So now I will summarize the sadist archetype by saying that the sadist mentality is the extension of an unresolved, traumatized past. All those times in the past that we were humiliated and rejected, abused or abandoned and made to feel worthless and inadequate have concentrated into this inner fireball of rebellion and stubbornness, whereby, now acting as a counterbalance, this compensation for those past events, the sadist archetype must now prove itself as being worthy, untouchable, and indestructible. Unfortunately, because pain is all this archetype has ever known, its mission is to endure pain in spite of everything and everyone. Enduring pain on a regular basis does, however, become a negative reinforcement that normalizes adversity and suffering. The sadist can then become expectant of and dependent upon pain and punishment from life and others, in which to validate its sense of self, self-worth, and strength. When harnessed for personal growth and working towards positive outcomes, the pain-absorbing abilities of the sadist are essential to persevere with progress and get the hard work done. We all, in some areas of our life, would benefit from taking a sadistic approach. We do sometimes need to be hard on ourselves to expose, test, and strengthen the weaknesses so that we can develop and harden that softer part and gain inner resilience. Now that you are acquainted with the sadist archetype, reflect upon how this characteristic trait shows up in your life. Where is this part of you a beneficial asset, and where is this part of you a detrimental impact? Once you have fully grasped the concept of the sadist archetype and you truly understand where the sadist shows up in your life, then move on to